I would like to introduce our next speaker, who is Tyler Hudak, and he is going to talk all about, not rolling a 1. At least some of you must get the joke, at least I hope. All right, and with that, Tyler.
All right, just give me 1 second here. So this is kind of an important question, I guess, for this talk is, how many people do understand what rolling a 1 means? How many people in here play D&D? All right, perfect. So at least half of you, so hopefully I'm not going to lose most of you on this. But if you don't know, in role-playing games, in many role-playing games, including Dungeons and Dragons, when you roll low, that's a bad thing. If you roll a 1, that's called a critical failure. And so, as we'll kind of get to this, I'll kind of circle things around as to how this is actually related to tabletop exercises, specifically incident response tabletop exercises. Well, let me just jump into it. So, my name is Tyler Hudak. There are 2 things you should know about me. The first is that I lead the amazing TrustedSec incident response team, a group of amazing individuals that we help clients when they get hit with attacks, go in, help them recover, help them figure out what happened, and so on. But incident response is an interesting industry because you don't have work all the time. It comes in waves. And so you have to fill that downtime. And one of the ways that we fill that downtime is through scheduled engagements. And our most popular scheduled engagement is tabletop exercises. I'm also a huge gaming geek. You can kind of see it in the picture there in the background. That shelf behind me goes the entire wall and is just completely full of role-playing games. I'm a huge RPG geek. I've actually been published in some books, trying to figure out how my retirement job can be to professionally get paid to do that, which I think would be awesome. But I found that IR tabletop exercises are very similar to role-playing games. So let me go into that. My contact information is on the bottom. It'll be at the end too. All right, so 3 things that we're going to cover. First, what is an IR tabletop? If you're not sure what it is, we're going to talk about that just so we're all on the same level, the same page as to what it is. The second is, what are some of the mistakes that I've seen when you set up a tabletop? So there are really 2 phases you go through when you run a tabletop or when you do a tabletop. The first is you go through the process to set up that tabletop exercise. And it's not just hey, we're going to do a tabletop exercise next week. There's a lot that goes into it. And I should have probably started off by saying this. I've run tabletop exercises for at least a decade now. The first time I ever ran one, I was freaked out because our client had asked, hey, can you run a tabletop? And back then, nobody really did that. Nobody really talked about that. There were very few resources online. And so as I was sitting there at my desk, freaking out, trying to figure out how can I get out of this engagement and not have to do it, I kind of turned around and saw my shelf of role-playing games. And it was much smaller than the one that was in the picture before. But it just kind of clicked then. That's when I realized that a tabletop exercise was really no different than an IR, a tabletop exercise was really no different than a role-playing game or running a role-playing game. And I could do that. I've done that for many, many years. What I'm going to try to do here, and I know I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but is really just show the parallels between, running a role-playing game. Because how many people in here have run a role-playing game before? All right, cool. A lot of you. You could absolutely tomorrow go and run a tabletop exercise with that experience. But there are definitely some common mistakes that I've seen in the 10 years that I've been running not only role-playing games, but tabletop exercises. We're going to talk about the mistakes that I've seen when you're setting one up, and then also the common issues that kind of come out of tabletop exercises. Because after you run it, you're going to have these gaps that you're going to find. You're going to have these lessons learned. I'm going to tell you what the common ones that I see are, so then you can go back into your organization and say, hey, do we do this or do we do that? And kind of, make yourself look good and take care of those before you even go through an exercise. We are definitely going to get a little nerdy here, so I apologize now. If you're not into D&D and all of that, just ignore that stuff. Just out of curiosity, how many people have already bought tickets for the Dungeons & Dragons movie? Just me. All right. All right. Okay, so what is a tabletop exercise? Really, a tabletop exercise is just a way to test your incident response plans and procedures, because you all have incident response plans and procedures, right? Sure. But test them before an incident occurs. The way that you run this, there are lots of different ways that you could run tabletop exercises. The traditional way, well, first off, why? First, you're running these to see if your organization can respond to an incident. Actually, I'll pull up all these here. Oh, that was bad animation. You want to test to make sure that your organization can respond to that incident. Do your plans and policies work like you expect them to? A lot of times we write down these plans and then nobody ever tests them until the event actually happens. And some of the assumptions that were made when writing those documents aren't true or maybe have changed. If your plan was written 2 years ago, your organization is probably different. And so you definitely need to go in and test that. You also want to make sure that everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. I have been on many tabletops that I've run for clients where the organization, we're talking to the organization, either business units or IT or security, and one person says, oh, well, this group would handle it. And that group just goes pale. They have no idea what they're talking about. Or especially when you talk to the business side, especially senior leadership, they probably really don't understand what they're supposed to be doing in an incident. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So the whole goal of this is to make sure that everybody knows what they're doing. And then finally, making sure that any third-party providers that you utilize also understand what they're supposed to be doing, and what you expect them to do is actually what they'll do. I'll talk about an example of that later on. So how do they work? First, you've got the moderator or moderators, usually one or two, and this is going to be the person or persons who are describing the scenario to the participants. The scenario is going to be a mock incident. It could be a ransomware attack. It could be a phishing attack. It could be an insider threat. It could be a combination of all of these. But the moderator will describe the situation, and the participants just describe back what they're doing. This is a traditional tabletop exercise. Everybody's kind of sitting around. More often than not nowadays, it's that virtual table in Zoom or Teams or something like that. And everybody's just kind of describing what they're doing. The job of the moderator is to describe that scenario to them and then dig into it. If somebody tells me that, oh, well, we were just restored from backup, that's great. I'm now going to throw in an inject that, hey, your backups have been deleted by the attacker. First off, tell me why that can't happen, and then I'll make a decision as to whether or not it can actually happen. And if it can, you don't have backups anymore. Now what are you going to do? And then you kind of the moderator throws these things at them. Again, this is a traditional one. You can absolutely get more hands-on with the tabletop exercises. We've done some that were where we'd actually ask the participants, especially on the IT security technical side, to go out and, hey, you told us you're going to go contain this, you would contain systems. There's a system over here that we've set aside specifically for this. Go do that. And then make them actually go and do that. And then once that happens, their next step will be, oh, we would just pull data off that. Great, this system's contained. Go get me that data you told me you would get. And oftentimes when that sort of thing happens, it's like, oh, well, I can't log into it because it's contained, and we only have domain or Active Directory credentials to that, and it can't connect to Active Directory to validate that. I'm like, great. Now what are you going to do? Because this is, you start to get a little bit more and more hands-on. I will talk about a situation, though, later on, of how far you should go with that hands-on, because I have definitely seen some issues with that. But this should look a little familiar. Again, you have the moderator, the dungeon master, if you will, and all the participants who are the players. You're describing the scenario, what's going on. They're describing what they're doing back to it. Very similar to Dungeons and Dragons, Backdoors and Breaches from Black Hills, very similar to that. In fact, thank you. That's exactly what Backdoors and Breaches is. It's a great way to kind of do one of the ad hoc tabletop exercise and throw all those injects in there. All right. So I wanted to get through that a little bit quicker, just so we can get to all the really good stuff. So, like I said at the beginning, there are really two phases that you go through if you're setting up or if you're doing a tabletop exercise. The first one is in preparation. This is going and setting up that tabletop exercise for your organization. So the first mistake that I see all the time is not inviting the right people. You need to absolutely 100% include technical and business. Most of the time, people forget to include the business side. That's where the gap lies. you absolutely need to have the business in there because the business wants to, or needs to make some of these decisions, some of these risk decisions during an incident. On the technical side, you're going to invite we always get asked, all right, well, who should we invite? On the technical side, invite those subject matter experts. The way that I typically put it is, anybody who is going to do hands-on work during an incident, either IT, your recovery people, your systems administrators, security who's going to be doing the investigation. You don't necessarily need to invite every single one of those people, because if you're in an organization where you may have like 10 or 20 people in that group, invite participants who can speak on behalf of the group, but invite those people so that they can respond to questions that we have during the exercise. And we're basically going to ask them things like, how do you respond? When you get into an exercise, you don't ask yes or no questions, because that's what you'll get, is a yes or no answer. You ask, how do you respond? And when they tell you how, and I'll say this too, I think I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but on the exercise, one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen is, from the moderator side, is, I just completely lost my train of thought. I will circle back to it. Sorry. But you want to ask, how do you respond? You want those people there to answer those questions. On the business side, you definitely want to invite the people in your business who are going to be making these decisions during an incident. So for example, in a ransomware case, who decides if you're going to pay? It's not IT, or it shouldn't be IT. Your leadership are going to respond to that. So you need to invite legal. Legal has a huge role in an incident. If IT disagrees with that, have them go talk to legal, because legal absolutely 100% is going to want to put things under privilege. They are going to want to be contacted immediately. They need to be involved in this, and they're often one of the most forgotten groups in exercises. But legal communications is absolutely key in incidents, especially once you get into those really high priority world-ending incidents like ransomware. You need to communicate to literally everybody that you can think of, and they're going to be the ones who do that. Senior leadership, absolutely. They need to make those high-level decisions, or at least understand what's going on. And a lot of times, the people who are giving them that information don't necessarily understand what information they want. And so getting them into that exercise to say, hey, we're going to be briefing you on this incident. What would you want to know? What questions do you have for us? An exercise is a great way to gather that information so that when an incident happens, you automatically know what to give them, and you're not sitting there for the first 10 minutes, listening to the same questions over and over again. And finally, HR. HR is really important. I would say probably more for insider threat cases, because HR typically handles insider investigations, or at least have a huge part in it. But in any other incident, they probably need to be informed, especially if there's a data breach of employee information, or you need to communicate with internal employees. They may want to have a say in what and how you word things, and so on. So the first one was who to invite. The second one, the biggest mistake that I see, is combining both technical and business exercises. What I mean by this is you should separate the exercises that you run for the business and for the technical teams. The biggest reason is because the technical exercise typically goes longer, and you're talking about very technical things. You're talking about IT, you're talking about how are you containing a system, how are you restoring a system. Legal and HR and communications don't care about that. They will get bored. They will tune out, and they will never want to come to one again. So you definitely want to make sure that you run these separately. Yes, that does mean you have to do it twice, at a minimum twice. But trust me, it is very much worth it. We insist on, as much as we can, whenever we're planning out that exercise for clients, that first off, we're doing both of the exercises, and second, that they're separated out. Now, if you have a really, really small organization, it probably doesn't make sense to separate them out. But if you have a really small organization, it's probably going to be a shorter exercise anyways. But the technical, I would align this more to what a role-playing game is like. You are describing the exercise. They're responding to actions, or responding with their actions, just like the slide that I showed before with the moderator and the participants. This is very much like a role-playing game, or again, the traditional version of tabletops. That you can run them differently. The business, however, You would run it, I recommend running it a little bit differently. How many people in here know what a session 0 is? All right, so some of you. So if you don't know, a session 0 is a term in role-playing games where you start that initial session and you create your characters, you explain the system, you set expectations. It's kind of that like intro education about the system and the game and what to expect and so on. When you run a business exercise, that's kind of what it is. Because if you think about it, the business side, and when I say business, I mean executives, leadership, legal, communications, and so on, they, assuming you haven't had a huge breach or a ransomware attack, they've only heard about it in the news. And let's face it, the media tends to blow these things a little bit out of proportion. And so they know all the scary stories, but that's it. So they don't really know what to expect. They don't know the ins and outs. They don't know all the little gotchas that they're going to have to decide upon. And so that's what I recommend making the business session like. You kind of make it half educational and half exercise. And the way that I typically approach this, especially on like sales calls and stuff like that, is let's take ransomware, the ransom payment. Because if you ever do a ransomware exercise, you absolutely need to talk about the payment. On the executive side, the way that we run it is, first off, we talk about what is a ransomware payment. What does that mean? How would you, and we go through, how might you pay it? You know, what's the process of doing that? Why, you know, and the reasons why you might go and pay it. And here are also the reasons why you might not pay it. So we go through that little education piece as to, you know, to bring them up to speed with ransom payments, and then we jump into the scenario. And we say, all right, you've had a ransomware attack. IT is telling you that you can't restore for over a week. The attackers want $10 million in Bitcoin. They're going to release data tomorrow if you don't pay. Let's talk about your process for paying the ransom, or more specifically, your decision-making process on if you would pay a ransom or not, and start going through it that way. All right. Any questions so far? Am I doing good? Cool. All right. So, one question to you all. What is the most difficult thing to do in D&D or just role-playing games in general?
Get everybody to the table.
Yes, that is absolutely it. Scheduling. The hardest thing in role-playing games is actually to get people to the table to actually play. The same thing with tabletop exercises. The biggest issue that I see is scheduling too little time. I've had organizations want to do an exercise in an hour. That is not possible. I've had exercises where I've had to talk to the executives. I got 10 minutes to run an exercise. Not possible. Absolutely not possible. Exactly. Yeah, those are, I know walking in, those are disasters. We push as hard as we can to not do that. In the end, the client is paying for what the client wants. I kind of have to do that, but you know, I'm still going to push back as much as I can. So the length of how much time you schedule is really going to be dependent on how deep you want to go, especially on the technical side. I'll talk about recommended timeframes here in a little bit, but the longer you schedule it, the more in-depth you're going to be able to go. And my rule of thumb is I always want more time than I need. So if somebody comes to me and says, well, we're not sure how much time, I'll give them a time frame, and then I'll say, and if we don't go through all that time, then everybody leaves early and everybody's happy they have some free time to themselves. You know, it's always better to have more time than less. So on the technical side, I recommend minimum 2 hours all the way up to 4 hours. I've run them for 8 hours. Again, the technical does tend to go a little bit longer. You're going into more details and so on. The executive side, minimum 1 hour. I know I said that 1 hour is not enough time. I meant for the entire exercise, both business and technical. The business side, let's face it, the people you're talking to in the executive tabletop, it's very difficult to get them to work through it's very difficult to get on their schedule. So if you can get an hour of their time, that's awesome. So what I recommend is if you only have an hour of their time, prioritize what you're going to talk about. Yes?
So if you're not outsourcing it, if you're doing it in-house, could you maybe, hey, we're going to do an hour from 11 to 12, and then an hour from 3 to 4? Like
Oh, yeah.
Where we left off, or do you not recommend that?
No, yeah, that would be good too. Because the question was, can you split it out? basically. And yeah, you absolutely can. And sometimes that's even better to do because then you can have takeaways. You give them homework. And so you talk through a couple things in the first hour, and then you say, all right, well, this is what we're going to talk about in the next segment. You know, we had some questions from this. Let's try and find those answers and then bring it back. Yeah. The business, again, 1 hour, try to prioritize and when you can. And that's what we tend to do. We typically only have an hour with executives, which is fine. We prioritize what we're going to talk about. If we have time left over, great. I will tell you, executives like to go down lots of different rabbit holes. And sometimes you guys kind of have to let them do that within reason. You know, your job as the moderator is to keep it on track. I have, rarely, but I have had people get into fights during tabletop exercises. So you kind of have to break those up every once in a while. We do have a slide. I don't have this in here. I probably should have put it. We do have a slide at the very beginning that says something like the moderator has basically ultimate power. They can stop all disagreements, questions, and disputes, and so on. Just basically so that we have that in the beginning that says, hey, if you're going down the wrong path, we're going to stop you, just so everybody knows. All right. The scenario, when you're writing that out, and I call it a scenario because that's really what it is, don't make it too difficult. Right size it for the group. You don't need to go to the worst case scenario. Now, you absolutely can. If you want to do a full-blown ransomware attack that takes down your entire network, Cthulhu is rising from the ocean, taking down everything, please go ahead and do that. However, if this is your first time running a tabletop or your organization's first time doing a tabletop, maybe start a little bit slower. I mean, think about it in role-playing game terms. Level 1, you're not going up against Tiamat, the 5-headed dragon. You're probably just going up against a bunch of weak goblins. Start off a little bit slowly. That being said, when my team gets brought in, we absolutely do worst case scenario because that's what we're being paid to do. But just kind of understand who your audience is what it comes down to. Like I said, start off small and build up. The big thing too is make sure you're doing a scenario which everybody can participate in. If you are having business in the exercise, make sure that there's something for them to do. Don't just do a scenario which is all IT and that the business would have nothing to do with. That's going to be boring for them. And it's going to be detrimental to you because in the future, as you go through that, you're going to start to have issues. They're not going to want to participate in the future. So make sure that you're including everyone. All right, so that's kind of the big lessons learned that I have from the common of setting it up. You're going to run into other issues too. Absolutely, every organization is different. Every organization is unique, but if you kind of go through what I just talked about and kind of keep those in mind, it will absolutely make things a lot smoother. So, common lessons learned. So now we're going to start talking about, you've gone through the exercise. What are the common things that I see that organizations go through, or the gaps that I see organizations have at the end? In other words, everything that you're seeing here, I probably shouldn't have this recorded, but these are the common things that we put in our reports for our recommendations. So think of this almost as like a glimpse into some of our tabletop exercise reports. But the first thing is IR plan and procedure issues. Everybody kind of laughed at the beginning when I asked if you had IR plans. Hopefully you really do. But what we've often found that there are definitely a lot of issues with IR plans. And procedures. The big thing is that it's missing information. The IR plan is missing information. A lot of people like to write that IR plan. A lot of organizations like to write that IR plan for an audit checkbox, and then it gets thrown into a corner and gathers dust. That unfortunately cannot happen for an incident response plan. So I look at an incident response plan as a high-level flow of the incident. So in other words, who is doing what? You have those defined responsibilities. What is legal's responsibility? What is the line of business responsibility? What is communications responsibility? What is IR's responsibility? And so on. Also have defined roles. Who is going to be the incident commander? Who's in charge of the incident? Who is the one who's in charge of the technical side of the incident? Who's going to be going through and who's going to be going through and talking to the help desk, to clients, and so on. Just to make sure that I'm right on time. We go to 12 for this one, right? All right, cool. All right. Also, you should also, in your IR plan, you should also have things like priority ratings and SLAs around them. So in other words, if you don't have priority ratings, the way that I look at it is every incident is the exact same priority. So if you have a help desk person click on a fish, that's the same priority as a full-blown ransomware attack if you don't have those defined somewhere. Now, hopefully you have them defined somewhere, but once you do, also put SLAs around them. How fast are you expected to react to a critical incident versus a low incident? These are typically defined within the incident response plan. And there are going to be lots of other guidelines in there too. I'll always recommend, if you can, have a flow chart, like a high-level flow chart of how the incident should flow, because nobody in the middle of a critical incident is going to sit down and read those paragraphs of information. Having that image is usually key. Additionally, you should also have IR procedures or playbooks. You probably have these for IT. I recommend having them for incident response as well. These are typically a little bit more detailed. They may not go to the level of detail of you need to contain a system, log into this console, click on this button, enter this into the field, and so on. It could be a little bit more generic than that, where you say something like, to contain systems, you go to CrowdStrike and quarantine it there. You pull the network cable, you contact the network team and have them VLAN it off, or have all those different ways, basically so that when you run into that incident, you kind of know what to do. You have that idea list there of, all right, well, plan A is to quarantine in CrowdStrike. If that doesn't work, plan B is to go to the network team and have them unplug it from the network or something like that. So just have those listed out there. I also recommend that they're broken out by incident type. So you have one for ransomware, you have one for phishing, for denial of service, and so on. Just so, there's going to be a lot of overlap, honestly, between some of those, but it is going to be a lot easier to hand that off to like a junior level person and say, hey, go do step 3 of the ransomware playbook and do this. And so on. In terms of how often they're modified, IR plans are probably something that you probably update once a year. However, playbooks should be living documents. Do not throw them. First off, don't put them in the IR plan. Don't put them as an appendix in the IR plan, because you'll never be able to update them. And second, as you get new technology, as you get new procedures on how to do things, as you find out a cool new way to do something, update your playbook for that. And so that's what I mean by living document. And like I said, these are not audit checkbook, checkboxes. Everybody needs to be familiar with these. Yes?
Roughly how many pages do you think an IR plan should be?
That's always hard to say.
Put a range. No more than X.
I mean, so the question is, how long should an IR plan be? You're right, it is very dependent on the organization. I would say if it's like 2 pages, that's way too small. I would say, again, depending on the organization, the good ones that I've seen are usually, they're in a digestible format, so probably 5 to 7 pages of content. There could be like images which bloom it out more, and then you have your appendix which lists out everybody's contact information and so on. But the main contact or content, I think you could probably fit that within 5 to 7 pages. There are some good templates online. I don't know where they're at off the top of my head, but there are some good templates online. Yes? So the question is, do I recommend having one kind of general incident response plan and then the rest, the playbooks kind of breaking out the different types of incidents? Is that what you're asking?
Well, actually, no. Incident response in your on-prem environment is going to be very different from what you do in AWS.
Right.
So, do you recommend having different incident response plans for those different?
Oh, okay, I got you. Do we recommend having different incident response plans for the different environments, because cloud is going to be different than on-prem, and you may have some other like OT and stuff like that. The general incident response plan, I would say, probably could still fit into that. You may need to have a couple call-outs for, like, if it's in the cloud, then we also need to involve these people and so on. Playbooks, absolutely, you should absolutely have stuff specific to that to those environments. The IR plan, I don't think you need to have separate IR plans because, again, I look at the IR plan as like this overarching document for incidents within within an organization. It should not be so specific that it names all of your technologies. That's another mistake that I see people make when they're making IR plans is they make it very, very specific to their technologies. And what ends up happening is, again, that IR plan doesn't get touched for like 2 or 3 years. And when you go back and review it, you ask them, oh, well, do you have this? Like, oh, no, we got rid of that a year and a half ago. So, yeah, I think, you can make the IR plan kind of generic for everything. And then you have those specific, other plans or procedures for all those different environments. Yeah, exactly. All right. What's this? Oh, insufficient communication plans. That is another thing that I see organizations have issues with. Like I said, communication is very important during an incident, especially one that involves a data breach. A lot of organizations feel like they can control the narrative, or they can wait because the attacker isn't going to release information on this because they want their money. That is absolutely not true, especially once you get into the extortion demands for a ransomware attack. Ransomware attackers are we're seeing a trend where they're moving to doing less encryption and more data breach, more data stealing, because they're finding that's what people are paying for. And I always get asked, how many of my clients pay the ransom? And this is a rough number. We don't keep track of those statistics, but what it comes down to is, I would say probably about 50% of our clients pay the ransom. And of those 50%, the majority of them, it's not because they can't recover their data, because they can, they have the backups. It's because they don't want that data being leaked or put online. But attackers are going to do everything that they can to control the narrative and force you to make those decisions by contacting your clients, contacting your partners, contacting your employees. They are going to contact the media. They are going to put your information up on their name and shame page. And the thing to remember too, and this is important to kind of let executives know is, and I think the communications team of your organization probably understands this, but not everybody might. It's irrelevant whether what the attackers put on their website is true or not. It's more the perception of the public of what's being put up on there. So, for example, there have been a couple cases in the last couple of years where supposedly a company has been compromised, and the attackers put it up on their website, and the media just swarms at this. Oh, so and so got compromised. I think the latest one was, what was it, Ring? Within the last couple weeks, supposedly got hit by a ransomware attack. Although I think it's starting to turn out that it wasn't Ring. It was a supply chain person to Ring that happened to have some of their data. So Ring was never compromised. It was somebody else. The attackers, it doesn't matter. They want to get their money. They're going to put up, oh, we compromised Ring, and so again, it comes down to the perception. They need to understand that. But because of that, we see often in tabletop exercises that the communications team or whoever's in charge of communications really doesn't understand the full extent of what they're going to need to do. So in an incident, especially a big incident, you're going to need to communicate with internal employees, clients, partners, law enforcement, regulators, insurance, media and the public, as well as probably a bunch of other people. If you're a public company, you're going to need to probably communicate with shareholders. You may have a parent company, you need to communicate to them. Did I put cyber insurance on here? No, if you have, oh yeah, I did. Cyber insurance, you definitely need to communicate with them. And so the organization needs to understand who they're going to communicate with, how they're going to communicate with them, and when. That's the most important part, is the when. And again, it comes back to, they are not necessarily going to be able to control the narrative. The company needs to absolutely get ahead of the story when they can, but the attackers may force their hand on this, or more importantly, your own employees may force your hand on this. There have been many times where somebody has leaked information. They posted a screenshot on Twitter or TikTok or some other social media site that says, "Hey, my company, I get the day off. My company got hacked," and post that screenshot of that ransomware note on their screen. It happens all the time, especially in I've noticed with universities. This tends to happen a lot because you have the students in there. They don't really care, and so they're posting everything. So yeah, it's you need to make sure that whoever's doing your communications, knows what they're going to do, has those playbooks in place. They need to have their own playbooks on how they're going to communicate to all of these different organizations, when they're going to do it, and so on. I also recommend, it might be hard to see at the bottom there, have some templates of what you're going to communicate already written up. Obviously, you're going to change that for the situation. I would never recommend just having a template and just blindly throwing it out there. It needs to be changed for whatever specific situation you're going through, but have that language already determined. Kind of know what you're going to say and then modify it for each situation, because that's going to save you a lot of time as well. Because inevitably what happens when you're in an incident and you need to draft these communications, the communications team or media relations or whoever it is, they draft it, then legal has to approve it, then leadership has to approve it, then probably some other people have to approve it, then legal has to approve it again, and then communications needs to make all the changes, fix all the changes to make sure it sounds, legitimate and it doesn't sound crazy. And so there's this whole process of going through it. You're not going to push out a press release within 20 minutes, is what I'm trying to say, unless you have these templates that have already been approved. Along the lines of communications as well, not just having insufficient communications plans, but not having out-of-band communications. You need to know what to do when your communication systems go down or you can't trust them. That's the big thing. Everybody in here has email. You probably have some type of real-time communications like Teams or Slack or something like that. Teams or Slack might not go down, but you may not be able to trust it. If an attacker has infiltrated your environment, they may be joining your calls. They may be joining your incident calls. They may be joining your Zoom calls. It has happened multiple times. So you may need to go out of band. And when I say out of band, I mean using some type of communication system which is completely segmented from your environment. Not connected to Active Directory. You don't log in with your Active Directory credentials. It's not on-prem. It could just, again, completely segmented. This becomes very important too for those communication messages. You can't necessarily use your main website. If you're under a DDoS attack or your main website has been compromised, you can't use that to push out information to the public, to the media, and so on. You need to have something else already available. Now, some of my team members don't agree that you should go this far. I disagree with that, but when I say out of band, there are a couple things that I think that you need to kind of keep in mind and try to set up. The first is email. Have some way to have out-of-band email. And when I say out-of-band too, for all of these, it isn't necessarily your entire organization. Your entire organization doesn't need an out-of-band email account. Your incident response teams and your leadership, they do. The people who are responding to this event that need to continue these communications, they're the ones who need to have most of this. But email, real-time chat, some way to, especially since we're all working remote or a lot of us are working remotely now, you need to have that way to stay in real-time communications. Voice, you may not be able to trust your phone systems. You may not be able to trust your cell phones and so on. And so have some type of voice network. One-way employee messaging, this is something that most organizations have more for disaster recovery. Some way to blast out a message to all the employees. Let's say you have a snowstorm or a pandemic that you're telling people don't come in. You need to have that one-way messaging system to people. Now, the one gotcha I've seen with this though is that a lot of these systems for organizations are opt-in. So most of the employees don't have that or have not opted into that. So even if you have this one-way messaging system to all of your employees now, make sure it actually will go to everybody and not, the 25% of the organization who has opted in.
Are there actually single platforms for this? Or do you get a few of these with this over here, you get a few of these with this over here?
I have not seen one that does all of this, at least for reliably. There might be. To be fair, I haven't looked too deeply into this. What I've seen most often is, except for the one-way employee messaging, everything else you can usually get through set up a separate Google infrastructure. So you have Hangouts and Google Drive and Gmail, and you can actually control it pretty well. There are other services similar to that. That would be good. Yes.
I'm kind of responding to his concern. Wouldn't needing to have multiple services for these create a level of redundancy?
It absolutely would. So, the comment was, wouldn't have excuse me, wouldn't have having different services for these have levels of redundancy or create those levels of redundancy. It absolutely would, but it would also create that level of extra level of complexity. For IT, for IT, it's probably not an issue. Have you ever tried to walk a CEO through logging into their email? Now try doing it for a system that they've heard of once. A way to combat this, though, is one of the things that I've seen done is set up like Chromebooks. And they're called the out-of-band Chromebooks. They're already like pre-configured to connect to everything. You just have to enter in your credentials, and yeah, you're probably gonna have to reset their credentials, which to be fair, I probably wouldn't remember credentials that I set 3 years ago anyways. But you have those, so they already have something that's separate that they can just turn on and start working, or at least get the information they need. File storage, communication sites, and so on. Big thing with all of these is don't wait to set these up. Set these up before an incident happens. There's a really good story. I think it was Atlanta, the city of Atlanta. I could be wrong on that, but I think it was the city of Atlanta. They got hit with a big ransomware attack a couple years ago. They told all their employees, go set up Gmail accounts, and we'll use that for the time being. The issue with that was Google saw this huge influx of new accounts being created from the same location and thought it was a spam attack. And so they killed every single one of those accounts. And now the city of Atlanta had no way to communicate. So again, go and set these up now. Don't wait to do that. Like I said, set it up now. One thing too for the file storage, upload all of your IR plans and procedures and things like that to it beforehand, because you're going to need offline copies. If you keep them on a file share in your internal network and you have a ransomware attack and that file share gets encrypted, you may be out of luck, or just print them off. Go old school. Yes?
So quick question, how do you advise folks, because I've seen people go back and forth with this on internal communications and wrapping it around attorney-client privilege?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, what do we advise people to do around internal communications and wrapping it around attorney-client privilege? My default answer is to say, go ask your lawyer. But what I've seen organizations do is those types of communications typically aren't under attorney-client privilege when you're doing a blast out to the whole organization, but they're also very generic. There's something, I wouldn't tell the organization or tell your help desk to tell people calling in, oh, we have a ransomware attack, things are down, we think that data has been taken. No, just say that we are having technical issues, we're working on them, we'll send you an update once it gets fixed. Now, of course, people are gonna talk, they're gonna figure it out, but the official communications that somebody is then going to forward to the media or their relative who's a reporter are going to be a bit more generic. So anything that I would say that, my recommendation, again, I'm not a lawyer, but anything that has any information pertinent to the investigation should be wrapped under attorney-client privilege, but that should also not be going out to a large number of people. It should be that kind of tight-knit incident response team. All right. So this is just a shameless promotion for me. I wrote a blog post a couple months ago about why out-of-band communications are important. This kind of goes over everything I said in the slide if you want to go out and read that. Jack my numbers up internally for the blog post, stuff like that. But in any case, another big issue that I see is tools and third-party providers. A lot of times people think, or organizations feel or think that their tools are going to do something. And when we get into an exercise, especially those hands-on exercises, they don't. Or there are those edge cases where they don't work like you expect them to. And that's what, to be fair, that's what tabletop exercises are for, to help figure this out. But what I see is, a lot of times, tools either don't work as you expect them to. The example I gave before, how do you obtain data from a system that's been quarantined? I've had issues with that with organizations who have, ironically, one organization that I'm thinking of, they've been a client of mine forever, done multiple tabletop exercises with them, swore up and down in the tabletop exercises, we would quarantine the system, we would ask, all right, well, can you get us data from that? This is what we would ask. Yes, we can absolutely get that. Had an incident, they quarantined the system, we said, all right, well, great, go get us that data. Well, how do we do that? Like, you literally told me 5 times that you could do this. Go through and, again, that's kind of what those hands-on exercises are for. It helps kind of, great, you're telling me this, now prove it. Kind of that trust but verify type deal. But again, make sure that your tools are working as expected. One of the big things that we've also seen is, organizations tend to have a lack of coverage on their systems. And this comes out in an exercise where, yeah, they have EDR, but it's only deployed to the workstations. It's not deployed to all the servers, or it's not deployed into OT, or there's zero visibility into OT. And yet we're doing an OT tabletop exercise. So make sure that you have all that visibility that you can. Yes?
What's EDR and OT?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So EDR is, I'm going to get this acronym wrong, but endpoint detection and response. Think of it as like, yeah, antivirus on steroids, where it's instead of like, it probably has some signatures in there, but instead of looking at just signatures, it's also looking at the behavior of the system. You can typically do a little bit more of actions on it. So you can sometimes do some forensics, you can grab data from it and so on. OT is operational technology, so think of this as like manufacturing networks, power plants, the stuff that's kind of controlling our lights and HVAC and stuff like that. Basically the systems that are running Windows 2000 still. And you laugh, but I literally had a case 3 weeks ago where I had to figure out how to grab data off of a Windows 2000 system. Yeah, it's, but you still need to have that visibility into those environments, and that's one of the big things that comes out of tabletops. DDoS attacks, that is a huge issue. Do you see them all the time? No, but it does happen. And for a while with ransomware attacks, attackers were utilizing DDoS to kind of extort you more. And one of the things that people don't think of until it happens with DDoS is that you can't use your internet. So that means you can't use your cloud system. So all that like stuff you have in the cloud, all of the like consoles for your EDR that's in the cloud, you can't use because your clients cannot connect to it. So kind of you kind of have to think through some of those things. And finally, validating providers will do what you think they will. I know we're kind of in the last 15 minutes here. We're almost done, but I wanted to tell a quick story. I did a tabletop exercise a while ago where we had, so I always invite or recommend to have third-party providers on tabletops. That's probably one of the people I should have put to invite. Because if you're gonna rely on a third-party service to help you in an incident, absolutely bring them in. Ask them what they're going to do. Find out what their procedures are. And a client had done this. They had brought in their MSSP, their managed security provider, and we're going through the incident. I think it was like a ransomware incident or something like that. And we get to a point where we're asking, all right, well, who's going to investigate the incident? And the client says, oh, well, our MSSP is. So I started asking questions, and the MSSP was kind of dancing around the answers until I finally honestly just got sick of somebody dancing around my questions and said, all right, here's the situation. We have this disk. It's been taken offline. It is patient 0. It needs to be forensically analyzed. Are you going to do that? And they kind of stopped for a second and then said, no, that's outside the scope of our responsibilities. And the client did not know this. The client assumed that they were the ones who were going to be doing this for this. So a huge gap that came out of this exercise was that they now needed to find an IR retainer that would do this for them. So again, this is a great way, exercises are a great way to kind of get those third-party providers to validate what you think that they're going to do for you. And not only that, what's the time frame that they're going to do it for you? What are their SLAs? I will say if you do have an incident response retainer, and I'm saying this as an incident response retainer, ask them what their current workload is or what their SLAs are for getting, responding and starting to work. Not only that, ask them, what do you do when you have a surge? Because every incident response company, they have to figure that out. We have, I don't even know how many retainers we have, but actually, I'll give you a little bit of inside scoop here. One of the ways that incident response retainers figure out how many people they need is they look at the number of retainers, and then they create a ratio of the number of their consultants, their analysts who can do incident response, to the retainers. And it's usually somewhere between 8 to 10 to 1. So for every 8 to 10 retainers, you have one person who can work on it. Normally, you're not getting every one of your retainers calling you. Think of this as like banks. Banks have with Silicon Valley, it's a great example. Banks have all this money in there, but they really don't have all the money in there. And so if everybody does a run on the bank, then the bank is in trouble. If every one of my retainers called me, I'm in trouble. Because I don't have enough people to work all of those incidents. And so you have what you call surge procedures. Ask them what those are. A great example of this was Log4j. everybody got called for Log4j. Hafnium, everybody got called for Hafnium. And so you have these attacks. We have precedent for these attacks that they need to know how to handle, and they need to be able to service you because that's within your contract. So definitely ask them about this. We talked about cloud. There's definitely a lot of lack of cloud capabilities that we find within incident response. So there's a lack of monitoring, response, containment, restoration, training, vendor issues. There's lots of vendor issues. What it comes down to is, and I tried to make the images a little bit, to what I'm talking about. The cloud is definitely the Wild West right now, especially in incident response. Incident response is one of those things where, honestly, cloud is a different beast, is what it comes down to. And so you need to have special training, and organizations need to understand this. And when we get into tabletop exercises, cloud is just one of those like magical areas that they just assume will be okay, and it's really not. And we are seeing more and more attacks in the cloud, not just systems in the cloud, but also the cloud consoles, attackers getting into that. If you have I'm going to screw up the acronym, but platform as a service, is that right? Where you have like a Heroku type thing. Attackers are definitely getting into those. And so, you still need to, Salesforce is a great example. You need to have, response capabilities into that. And include those and absolutely include those into your tabletop exercises. One I just did was it was a breach within Salesforce, and everybody swore up and down, oh, nobody could ever get into this. Good thing was my contact at that company had actually done some research for me and found that yes, you could actually breach our Salesforce dev environment, which just so happened to have production data into it. And everybody in the exercise said, no, you can't do that. That's absolutely not possible. And so we said, all right, well, hold on. He pulled up a movie and showed exactly how he did this, and the entire call got silent. It was actually kind of awesome. But the point, and actually this leads right into my next slide. The point wasn't to shame everybody. It was just to show that, yes, this could actually happen. One of the things I didn't say, when you're designing your scenarios, make them realistic. Don't just say, oh, we have ransomware. Magically ransomware has appeared in our environment. What do we do? I mean, yeah, you could go that route, but it's not realistic. Plan everything out. How did the attackers get in? All right, they got in through phishing. Great. How would somebody bypass our phishing defenses? This is a great way to kind of call out those little gaps that you've been trying to fix forever. Put them into a exercise, and then it becomes a gap within that exercise. All right, I'm going to go through. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go through these a little bit quickly. Insufficient containment. The big thing, the big thing here is that a lot of organizations, they have a way to quarantine or contain systems, like 1 or 2 systems or maybe a dozen. What are you going to do if you have to quarantine 500 systems at once? That's where a big gap lies for a lot of organizations. So that usually revolves around needing to script it out to work with your APIs of whatever you're using to quarantine systems. Make sure that you can do that, or at least you're thinking about that. Also make sure all environments are covered. Again, this comes down to making sure cloud is covered, making sure OT is covered, making sure the executive environment is covered, just everything. I've even seen organizations go so far as to make sure that their employees, not their employees, but the executive homes are covered as well. Over-reliance on one person. We all have that person in the organization who kind of knows everything. They've been in there forever. Don't rely on that person. They are going to be gone during an incident. It happens all the time. Or if they're not gone in an incident, what if you have 2 incidents at the same time? It does happen. You may have 3 incidents at the same time. They can't work all 3 at the same time. So what this comes down to is if you see this within your organization, make sure that you're spreading the knowledge. Make sure that you have more than one SME. There's a reason we have backups. And also document everything that you can. This goes back to having those IR plans and procedures. Make sure that everything there is documented. Talked a little bit about this already. Extortion discussions, especially on the executive side. This is what ransom payments, the data breach payments, things like that. Thing to keep in mind is, and make sure your executives know this, they may not be asked specifically to pay a ransom. You may have your data up for auction, and you may need to buy that data to either know the full extent of what the data breach was or to prevent somebody else from getting that data. You may need to make a payment decision because of that. And so there are a lot of questions that your executives or your leadership need to be able to make or know about when they're making these decisions, like Under what criteria would they pay? Who negotiates it? Who's going to facilitate it? What if the actor is sanctioned? The big thing on the facilitation is a lot of organizations think that insurance is going to pay their ransom for them. It is not. I mean, check your policy, it might, but chances are it's not going to. It's more of a reimbursement thing up to a certain amount. And so it becomes an issue there. Yes? Yep. Yeah, so the question is, or the comment was that, are you supposed to contact your cyber insurance policy early on? Absolutely. You absolutely need to. And in fact, that's one of the discussions you should have with them, especially on these exercises, if you can get them on an exercise, is find out when are we supposed to contact you? Because one of the things that insurance companies might do, I'm not saying this will happen, but one of the things that they could do is if you don't contact them at the right time, they may just say, no, you didn't contact us, so we're not going to pay anything. I haven't personally seen that happen. I wouldn't be surprised if it could happen. But yes, absolutely, make sure that you understand, especially with payments, who's going to be doing that? Will insurance, negotiate for us and so on. Big thing here, and I know this is probably obvious, but don't document when you would pay because the attackers will 100% find that document and then meet every one of those criteria, and then they're going to throw that document back in your face. So don't document that. Document more of who makes the decision and then have those offline discussions. I think this is my last one. Is it? Yes, this is my last one. Don't go into an exercise having bad intentions. Unfortunately, I have been in those exercises where it was the goal of somebody to basically name and shame of the other groups. Don't do this, please. First off, for the moderator, it's a horrible experience to go through. But second, it's not beneficial to the organization. Yes, you're going to have these disagreements. Yes, you're going to find gaps, but don't have this turn into a finger-pointing situation. Exercises are meant to find those gaps so you can make the organization better and move on from there. So, like I said, don't shame other groups. Don't bring up past issues, especially if they've been resolved. Like, oh, well, this group failed in the past. We can't trust them or anything like that. Don't bring those up. Don't call people out directly. Don't argue about every little detail. Now, granted, it is part of the moderator's responsibility to make sure that things move smoothly. But again, it does come down to the participants. And like I said before, I have had to almost break up fights in exercises. Yes.
This may be obvious, but maybe at a fifth, but don't think you can't learn anything. There's some people that feel like you can't teach them anything.
Exactly.
You've got everything covered. You're wasting my time.
Yeah, and I think especially on the business side, they probably don't understand or they don't know what they don't know. And so yes, everybody, even myself, who has. I've run, in the last 5 years, I've probably run at least like 200 to 300 tabletop exercises. I always learn new things. Every organization is different. Every once in a while, I'll have an organization throw something at me that it's brand new to me. I have no clue. Especially like things like VDI and stuff like that. You never think about those until the very end or until something happens. And so, yeah, you absolutely can learn something. Yes?
What's your opinion or, I guess, experience with ransomware payments?
So the question was, how have I seen ransom payments go, especially like with banks? Fortunately, I'm not involved in that process. I don't want to be involved in that process. My job is pretty scoped down. That being said, I know that organizations that I've talked to have had issues with buying things like cryptocurrency, depending on their vertical, depending on their organization, and so on. So one of the things that we've had some organizations do recently is kind of come up with those plans of how would we buy cryptocurrency, or maybe even having like a cryptocurrency reserve. Now these are huge organizations that do that. I wouldn't expect like a small to medium business to have like a cryptocurrency reserve, but at least have those ideas, or more importantly, talk to your insurance company to see if they'll do it. Some IR providers will facilitate that transaction for you. Talk to them, or they at least know somebody who does. Like I said, we don't do it, but we have partners that do. So it kind of comes down to going out and asking. Almost out of time. I think I have like a minute and a half left. Again, the big thing with tabletop exercises is you want it to kind of show those gaps, and you want it to end like this. You want everybody, not everybody's going to be celebrating and happy at the end of a tabletop exercise, but it should not end like this. Hopefully, everything that I talked through here, all the mistakes that I've seen in the many years that I've been running exercises will hopefully help some of you here. If I didn't cover something or I went through something quickly, especially at the end there, I know I'm out of time right now, please feel free to contact me. I'll be at the conference all day. Feel free to email me. I'm always happy to answer questions and so on, but I'm out of time. So thank you very much. I'll be outside to answer questions.